I'm conflicted on how I should approach this review. Not because I can't decide whether or not I like the movie, but because I can't decide whether or not I should judge it based on how well it does at being an adaptation of one of the most influential sci-fi anime films ever. Because if I judge it on how accurate of an adaptation it is, it leaves much to be desired, presenting not much more than just a shell of its source material. But if I judge it on the virtue of its own merits as a sci-fi movie, as a cyberpunk movie, something that we get so little of these days, well, then it becomes a whole lot better. In fact, I really rather enjoyed it quite a bit. I guess I'll start by addressing how it stands as an adaptation. For reference, I've seen the original movie a few times, having views in both English and Japanese. I've seen about half of Standalone Complex, and I've seen the first 3 chapters of Arise. And as far as I can tell, this seems to be an original story, but one that borrows heavily in ideas from previous adaptations to make the world feel familiar to returning fans. That said, it never really quite reaches the same level of philosophical musing that the original film does. It ends up being a lot more pulpy, and its attempts at being philosophical kind of fall flat. The movie is a visual treat though, it's beautiful, and this cyberpunk Japan is vibrant and colorful and dirty. It's nothing new if you're familiar with cyberpunk, but damn do I love it. Maybe it's more to say about our lack of cyberpunk media, but seeing the bright neon against the gritty streets felt refreshing. Even the use of synthwave got me excited. They sprinkle in little things, iconic images, shots from the original movie, some less obvious than others, like the dog, and it's kind of nice to see that fan service, but it keeps reminding you that you are watching Ghost in the Shell, which, in this case, is a little bit of a double-edged sword. A lot of these iconic scenes have purpose in the original film, and in here they just sort of lack meaning. It's sort of an empty representation. Though the world is pretty faithfully recreated in look and the tech, the characters are less so. It's hard to really get into detail without getting into too many spoilers, but I'll say it's easy to enjoy most of the performances without comparing them to their source material. For example, Togusa is straight up a different character. He doesn't play a particularly big role in the movie, but he's there just enough, providing probably the most amount of lines compared to the Major, Bato, and Aragaki, but it just doesn't feel right. He's straight up a different character. It just kind of bugged me. What's more of an issue though is Scarlett Johansson's portrayal of the Major. It just wasn't all that compelling to me. Something about her performance felt stiff and robotic. Even the way she moved was off-putting to me. I found this version of the Major to be actually the most disappointing part of the movie, and it's not because of that reason. I like Scarlett Johansson, but I really feel like she could have done better in this role. It's kind of as though they thought because she was a full cyborg that she should move differently and act differently, and though there is certain a point in there where they're trying to make in the narrative her constantly questioning, what she is, being the first full cyborg in this version of the universe, that she just never really quite comes into it on her own. They never had that issue in the original source materials. The Major just moved like anybody else, being a hard, cold, sort of methodical thinking badass, but in Arise you see a little bit more of that humanity, a younger Makoto, but in this you're kind of getting the worst of both worlds. It's not bad, it just didn't feel like the Major, at least for most of the movie. Like I said, I really liked Ghost in Shell. I enjoyed the original source material and have a great respect for it, as I am infatuated with cyberpunk. It maybe falls more on the pulpy spectrum of cyberpunk than many fans may prefer from this property, but I found it to be rather enjoyable. There's a lot to talk about for this movie, but that goes into spoiler territory. Zack and I will be getting together to discuss this movie in full and tear it apart and really kind of analyze its references and sort of where it got what it was getting. But that's coming later in the week. So, subscribe if you want to see that and know when it's coming up. And Ghost in the Shell is not an amazing movie, but it's pretty good. It's fun and entertaining and a visual treat. It's got a lot of cool ideas that maybe it could have explored a little bit more or a little bit better in a more philosophical way, as it does kind of come up feeling flat. But for people who aren't as familiar with cyberpunk, these ideas might feel a lot more fresh, a lot more interesting. When I was in the theater, I was hearing lots of people going like, "Oh, that's so cool! Oh, that's, you know, really awesome!" and like constantly like gushing about how cool. Clearly, in a way that like these were brand new ideas to them. And if you've never seen anything Ghost in the Shell, go watch this movie for sure. It's you might walk away, with a sense of awe and how cool it was. But for people who are familiar with Ghost in the Shell and cyberpunk in general, it was cool seeing those things brought to life in the big screen. But like I said, the narrative could have been tighter and the performances could have been a little bit better. But overall, I liked it, and I think it's worth checking out. That's it for now. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, do all those things that you do on the YouTube things when you like things, and enjoy the movie. See you next time.